Even though it's no longer the best-selling out of all the games, Xenoblade 1 is probably still the most iconic game in the Xeno series when it comes to general gaming culture, although I probably have to say Smash did a lot for that. Despite this though, it is actually by far the least Xeno game in the entire series, and in order to explain that, we're first going to have to go through a bit of stuff about its development history. So we're going to do that, and spoilers for all of the Xenoblade games. The first thing on that agenda is going to be going through and quickly analyzing the original reveal trailer for the game that was shown at E3 2009. So, first off, the audio. The only thing playing throughout this trailer is just the music, and it uses a version of Time to Fight, the main battle theme, that definitely precedes the final in-game version. Not 100% sure on everything just because of the bad audio quality from a video from 2009, but while it does seem to use the same samples, it has small differences in the balancing of different parts of the song, the final version has more instruments in general, and the bridge section that builds tension at around the 50-minute mark of the song is almost completely different in the final game. Visual-wise, it opens up with a beta version of the Battle of Sword Valley. While superficially it is very similar to the scene we got in the final game, there are a bunch of key differences. First off, the camera angles, the choreography, and the general setup of things are completely different, including the amounts and types of mechon present. Secondly, the environment itself is a bit less detailed. There are streams of ether running down the sides of the valley and walkways and stuff present in the final game, so it's clear that this was an incomplete version of the area, and also, in keeping with the angles and shots being different, the actual fight choreography is completely different than when we see Dunban soloing all the mechon in the actual cutscene. This isn't anything too spectacular, but I think it's worth noting that the animation definitely comes off as different to how fight scenes look in the final game here in this trailer. I can't really put a finger on it why, because I just lack any technical knowledge of animation, but I do think that what's shown off in this trailer is worse animation-wise than what is present in the final game, at least in the fight scenes. I don't really know what it is, but I think it's just because Dunban's movements are a bit floatier looking, less natural, and they don't flow together as well as the equivalent scene in the final game, which admittedly is shorter, so had to be a bit snappier. I'm not sure why it looks worse here. My guess would just be, oh, they re-storyboarded and redid the scene because it didn't look as good as they wanted to, or this was a placeholder to begin with and they were able to polish it later, because as far as I can tell, Xenoblade 1 didn't use motion capture like 2 did, so it wasn't a thing of, oh, they hadn't recorded all the mocap references yet, so the animation didn't look as good. It was just, they improved it over time, which is a good thing. And overall, I would say this trailer definitely averts the thing of, the reveal trailer for a game is the best the game ever looks, and it just continually gets worse over time, because the first one was either pre-rendered or using an incomplete build of the game that didn't have all the assets loaded, and so what they were able to show off looked better. Xenoblade 2 also clearly followed this lead. You can definitely tell how the visuals improved as you went from trailer to trailer and showcase to showcase. X is a bit of a flip-flop on this case, just because while certain things, I believe the environment looked better over time, character models and a few cutscenes that took place in NLA did look noticeably worse than they did in trailers in the final game, likely because when that was shot for those trailers, all of the world wasn't on disc at the time, or they were shooting it from a PC and not an actual Wii U, and that kind of stuff. Next up is the lab scene of the Monado running wild that leads into Shulk's first vision. Both he and Fiora have different outfits here, and she also has a different hairstyle. This haircut is shown off in the concept art, in the secret archive, so there's nothing too huge to talk about here, but it's worth noting that Fiora's clothes might just be an early instance of armor-changing appearance, because that is the appearance of an actual armor set for her in the final game, and we have no indications that this was actually intended to be her default outfit at any point, other than the fact that the concept art of her with the twin tails is wearing that outfit. Shulk, on the other hand, I have reason to believe that this outfit he's wearing, which is a beta version of one of his final game armor sets, though there are more obvious differences than with Fiora, was intended to be his default outfit at some point. Also, in the close-up on Shulk's face, it's extremely different and kind of creepy looking, but I think the actual model, at least in his head, is slightly higher in fidelity than in the final game. I'm not sure, it might just be the weird quality of the trailer doing it to me, but something about his eyes and especially his mouth make it look a bit higher quality and I guess a bit better at emoting than the version in the final game, which I guess it's just weird. I always thought the way Shulk's lips looked in the actual game looked kind of weird, and I guess it's just averted in this version of the model for whatever reason, so it might just be an uncanny valley thing with me. We also get some classic Xenoblade trailer running through places, shots of Magna Forest, Colony 9, and Frontier Village. There's nothing super interesting here, besides the fact that there are less NPCs in the towns than there are normally. Presumably the dialogue and stuff was turned off because trailer. And there's an ether crystal deposit in Magna that seems to be using a different looking texture than in the final game. We also get some battles in Magna Forest. The party for all fights shown off in the trailer is Shulk, Rein, and Dunban, all of whom are using different portraits for the UI than in the final game. Shulk's portrait is interesting because it has the collar from the outfit he wears in the trailer, suggesting that yes, this was intended to be his default or main outfit at some point in development, and Rein's, strangely enough, seems to be the green outfit he has on during the battle scenes, but not the cutscene. So, the cutscene was actually showing him wearing different armor, and the green stuff we see in the battles was potentially intended to be his default outfit. So, there's a lot of weird outfit stuff here, although Dunban is just wearing a beta version of his classic ascot cape thing that he has. The UI is pretty obviously extremely incomplete, but interestingly enough, the targeted enemy's name shows up in a static position above the party HP, instead of being combined with the enemy HP bar in a tag above the enemy's head. This creates a weird mix of the final game Xenoblade 1's moving tags that contain both the enemy name and HP bar, and then what Xenoblades X and 2 did, where the targeted enemy's bar was static at the top of the screen. Interesting. Doesn't connect to anything, but it's interesting. Throughout this trailer, every party member is shown as being level 1 despite the locations, and the enemies here in Magna are level 3, but this is obviously dev footage and not supposed to accurately reflect the final game based on the lack of art icons. It just does not look very clean, but again, X's first trailer had a much worse UI than the final game, so this is overall not very surprising. Get another running scene of Beta Satoral Marsh. It's Beta Satoral Marsh. And then we get the fight against the Arachno Queen. This has a few more this was obvious dev footage weirdness, like Dunban being there, and her being level 16, still fighting 3 level 1 characters and not immediately destroying them, weirdly enough, instead of level 12 like she is in the final game. And then we get back to a bit more Sword Valley before the title card fades in at the end of the trailer. Monado, beginning of the world. Xenoblade Chronicles was not originally named Xenoblade, and in fact, even once it was given that name, the Chronicles part was just added on as a dub-ism when the game was localized by Nintendo of Europe, and the Americans just picked up on that when they brought it overseas. There is Japanese text underneath the English for Xenoblade on the Japanese version of the logo, but that just says Xenoblade, so people who can't read Romanji can still read the title of the game they're playing, and it doesn't have anything to do with a subtitle. In fact, Xenoblade Chronicles X is just Xenoblade Cross in Japanese, and Xenoblade Chronicles 2 is of course just Xenoblade 2. To understand all this name weirdness, why the name was changed in the first place and why it matters, we need to talk about the game's development history, and not just the pre-release material we were given. The game came to be because Monolith Soft wanted to create a JRPG masterpiece. It was basically the studio's way of proving to themselves that they could make games that were well received after the lukewarm sales and reception of the Xenosaga series. A lot of new developers had joined up with the studio over the development of that series, and everyone was uneasy about how it turned out, so there was overall an air of wanting to knock it out of the park next time, to create something that resonated with more people and that obviously sold better. I don't necessarily want to say that they wanted to make a better game than Xenosaga, because with the exception of Episode 2, I don't think many of Monolith's developers, who stuck with the company through the Blade games, thought that they were making bad games. They just wanted to get things that were more widely received, and did better overall, and I'd say with the reception Xenoblade got, they eventually succeeded. But we're obviously not there yet. The idea for the game first started out when Xeno series creator Tetsuya Takahashi had a brilliant idea on a train ride. What if there was a world where humans walked around living their everyday lives on the dead bodies of giant gods? He brought this idea up to the studio and people liked it to the point where a developer actually made a model out of two of these gods, frozen in place after being locked in a timeless struggle. This obviously became the basis for the Bionis and Mechonis we all know and love, and once development started on this project in earnest, things really started falling into place. This model was made in 2006 during the dev cycle of Disaster Day of Crisis, which was Monolith Soft's first game that they developed themselves as opposed to assisting another team, after being bought out by Nintendo. Yes, the Baten Kaitos series came out for the GameCube, but that was under Bandai Namco, and in fact, those games came out in between releases in the Xenosaga series, so yeah, that couldn't really have been Nintendo. Once focus was shifted over to this RPG project, they started going through Takahashi's usual progress. Kind of contrary to what you'd think from a developer who writes really good stories and has his magnum opus being him trying to tell the same story for 20 years, he focuses on the world first, and then once that world is designed and believable, then inserts a story and characters to go with it. The way the world for this game was designed was by figuring out what kind of areas the characters could explore that would result from the unique situation of being on the bodies of giant humanoid creatures, and that informed the design of a bunch of areas in the final game. Once area concepts were designed, characters were brought up, and a story was dropped in to tie everything together. It's very likely that this original story was similar to the one in the final game, and I think we can agree that Monado, Beginning of the World, is a title that very much fits the Xenoblade Chronicles that we all got. And now the name change. At some point in between the initial E3 2009 showing and a Nintendo investors meeting in 2010, Nintendo highly suggested or outright demanded that the name of the game be changed from Monado Beginning of the World to Xenoblade. The only Nintendo, i.e. not Monolith Soft, employee we've heard talk about this change at length was Satoru Iwata himself, which, although not concrete, leads me to believe he had some sort of role in recommending that the name be changed this way. He said in the original investors meeting that it was changed in order to honor Takahashi and his work and dedication on previous games in the Xeno series, basically by allowing him to use his trademark on a game that he was pouring so much into, and he was basically trying to revitalize the genre with, and thank God he succeeded with that, honestly. The thing is, though, as touching of a gesture as this is, and I honestly think this is my favorite Iwata going above and beyond to do something moment, like, even more than the Earthbound one or the Pokemon Gen 2 one, and why are all of these moments connected to RPGs besides, I guess, the Melee one? Kind of a weird coincidence, I guess. He did kind of miss the point. Because, unlike Hideo Kojima, for whom the label a Hideo Kojima game basically just means a game made by Hideo Kojima, Xeno is a bit more restrictive. The prefix Xeno being applied to the title of a game that is applicable for this Xenoverse does not count, does not just mean a Tetsuya Takahashi game or a Tetsuya Takahashi RPG. Xenogears and Xenosaga share that prefix because they are tellings of part of the Perfect Works story, the original 6-part universe-spanning, millennium-spanning epic of which the original Xenogears was only part 5 of 6. Xenosaga is basically an alternate universe retelling of some of the early parts of that story, and as such, has a lot of carried over thematic elements and the Xeno prefix. Monado, Beginning of the World, was not written to be any part of the Perfect Works story, so it did not have the Xeno name at the beginning of development. It was given the Xeno name to honor Takahashi and his work, but it was not ever intended to be an actual Xeno game in spirit. There are things that could seem as connections or parallels to Xenogears and Xenosaga in Xenoblade 1, obviously, but these were not written as, oh, this is part of the same overarching story. These were more or less just hallmarks of Takahashi's writing style, or him subconsciously reusing elements and themes and things that he likes, not intentional callbacks that actually mean something significant, like the equivalent things in Xenoblade X and 2. Let's just talk about the biggest thing to show this. The Zohar, a mysterious and unlimitedly powerful artifact that serves immensely important roles in Xenogears and Xenosaga, does not show up at all in Xenoblade Chronicles 1. It doesn't show up in X as well, although it is referenced and alluded to in the terms of a few things calling back to its shape, and also a few things calling back to its use and its purposes. And then, of course, Xenoblade 2 has the actual darn thing show up in a cutscene, although renamed to the Conduit. So yeah, Xenoblade 1 is connected to the Zohar, but only because of a retcon introduced by Xenoblade 2. In XC1, the religious references are almost entirely to Gnosticism instead of the usual Judaism/Christianity combo that just borrows some Gnostic elements like the Demiurge. And there's also pretty much nothing connected to psychology in Xenoblade 1 as well. Weirdly, there's also less pop culture references. You might not think about it, but they're actually a bit of a major part of what makes a Xeno game. I'm sure you could find plenty in Xenoblade 2. There are definitely plenty in X, right down to some of the Xeno races, and just a bunch of quest star references to things, shoutouts to movies and that kind of thing. But this started at the beginning. If you know what to look for, Xenogears has a ton of references to sci-fi pop culture because, well, that is a thing that Takahashi really likes, and he is definitely a person to make games about the things he likes. There is a reference to Excuse Me, Princess in Xenoblade 1, but that is definitely a dubism because, well, that wasn't in the Japanese version of the Zelda cartoon. Did that Zelda cartoon ever get dubbed into Japanese? I don't actually know. So, anyway, Xenoblade Chronicles X. Japanese name, Xenoblade Cross. That is because it is Xenoblade's gameplay, i.e. the new gameplay style developed by Xenoblade 1, aka Monado Beginning of the World, crossing over with Perfect Works stuff, mainly Xenosaga. I think we can agree that X is a bit more influenced by Saga, while 2 is a bit more influenced by Gears. Xenoblade Chronicles X could also sort of be construed to be a partial telling of the very first part of Perfect Works, which would put it even before Xenosaga's equivalent. Xenoblade Chronicles 2, on the other hand, is just straight up an alternate universe retelling of Gears, or Perfect Works Episode 5, and then we actually got Torn of the Golden Country, which is the first ever telling of Perfect Works Episode 4, albeit in the Xenoblade 2 universe as opposed to the original Xenogears one. The weird thing about this, though, is the two Perfect Works connected Xenoblade games had to then take influence from Xenoblade 1 in order to still be considered in the same series as that, despite 1 being the odd one out by not really being a Xeno game. The major example here is how mechs were controllable in gameplay in Xenogears and Xenosaga, but they weren't in Xenoblade 1 because it wasn't trying to carry over essential elements of the Perfect Works-based games because it wasn't going to be one of them. X then brought them back because it was including elements and callbacks to Gears and Saga, but since 2 was telling a Perfect Works-based story, but followed the exact formula of a game that didn't have Perfect Works elements, i.e. pilotable mechs, it ended up not including them at all, despite being a retelling of Xenogears that very prominently featured mechs. So, all in all, the current state of the Xeno series is some weird kind of flux where the one game that was never intended to be part of it ended up becoming the poster boy for the entire thing, despite not being representative of the entire picture at all, and not really deserving the title Xeno game, besides having the prefix and retcons introduced in a later game that was written to be Xeno from the beginning. We've also got this thing where now future games that are written to be Xeno games are probably going to have the Blade title in them because, well, they've still got the IP, they might as well keep using it. Only reason they stopped Gears and Saga is because they lost rights to those. And as such is going to have to take cues from Xenoblade Chronicles 1 in addition to all the Perfect Works stuff. So, this game that was never intended to be Xeno is now also going to inform how the Perfect Works story is told in the future. I'm not necessarily saying I want to go back to the gameplay style of Xenogears and Xenosaga, but the way the story is told and certain themes and elements only present in Xenoblade 1 have shown up in X and 2 alongside things drawn from the older games, so, like it or not, there's now this weird mishmash of Perfect Works and Monado Beginning of the World that's probably going to be the Xeno series from now on. But wait though, one more thing, because hidden very deep in the code of Xenoblade Chronicles 1 is an alternate version of the original Monado Beginning of the World logo. It's different than the one in the trailer. That one just had Monado and the subtitle underneath it, but this one separates them with a semicolon. This can only mean one thing. Not that they were considering slightly altering the title before it was changed to Xenoblade, but one even more important. The big thing Xenoblade 1 can bring to the Xeno series isn't its new themes and elements, or even its gameplay style that a lot of people love, and I personally prefer, to the more turn-based Gears and Saga. It brings time travel. Because yeah, Shulk had his visions of the future, but more importantly, this game itself was a vision of the future. Monado, beginning of the world, came an entire decade before, and yet predicted Minecraft The Way Home perfectly. And I don't think I could add anything more to that. Goodbye and good night, people. So, yeah. I don't know if you could tell, but that last thing was supposed to be a joke. There is no alternate version of the Monado logo in the files of the game, as far as I know. I was just being stupid. Yeah, I'm pretty good at that, so I did it. I wish I had more to say, but I don't. I kind of resent the fact that I started making my videos in a format that requires me to draw out all these endings now, cause, yeah. But, check out my Let's Play channel, because there's probably going to be an episode of Astral Chain Blind up on there already. And I promise that my humor there is probably going to be slightly better than just making Minecraft The Way Home jokes. I can't promise you everything, though, because I'm probably going to slip into it at some point during a 15-hour game. But yeah, check it out, because I haven't recorded that yet, but I'm sure I'm enjoying the game. So go check out to see if I was right in my prediction here. And then comment to see if I was right or not on that video. I don't know. Goodbye. Until next time, this is Luxin signing off because I don't know when to shut up.